Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, we are going to be discussing the best cards for the current metagame in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, the staples and other such cards to add to your deck, and most notably main deck, to help you most in the current metagame. So we have a bunch here. It's not everything, but it is quite a few, and we're just going to go through these real quick, and I'm going to tell you whether or not they are good for the current metagame or not. And yeah, that's basically it. It's mostly centered around the current metagame and currently what is seeing a lot of play on the ladder and what to expect. So yeah. Anyway, we have the 5 tiers. We have always. These are cards you're almost always going to be wanting to play at least 1 to 2 copies. Just because they're going to be good, but most of the time you're going to be wanting to play 3. We have good in the current metagame, which means they're good. There are options available to you. If your deck maybe synergizes with them, it's going to be something that you are more likely to include, and stuff like that. Decent is something that is more so deck specific. If your deck can run a lot of non-engine, for example, maybe it's going to be worth running. We have not worth, just don't really consider it. And then bad is just generally most of the time they're going to be bad. Not even just like situational, just like not worth playing for the vast majority of options. Now I don't think much is going to go into here, but it is just something to be considered. Starting off with the Alpha, or the Beast, Beast King Alpha, I believe is what this card is called. Sure. Yeah, it's not really great right now. It's decent because it's just like a big body, and it can contest like Apollosa and stuff like that. But realistically, it requires you to go second to really do anything, and I'm not a big fan of the cards that are specifically designed to either go first or to go second, especially in a best of 1 meta. It's just not really all that great. I'm actually going to switch this to just situational, because I don't think there are any bad cards that are on here. They're all mostly just situational. So I'm actually just going to move this down to situational. Most of the time, most decks aren't really going to need it. As of right now, Bestials are kind of bad. The only thing that Bestials really do well against is Branded. And Branded is like the only deck that really runs Bestials anyway. But even with that being said, Bestials don't hurt Branded enough to see them actually be worth playing as a main deck inclusion. You'd want something else to kind of hit other such decks, because like they're not going to do anything against Super Heavy Samurai. They're not really going to do anything. They kind of sometimes do stuff against Labyrinth, but you know, there's that. They're decent in a few different decks like Vanquish Soul occasionally, but again, it's one of those things where it's like, well, do you really want those as opposed to other such cards? I'd say just right now in general, I'll put them in decent. They're still Bestials, but they're not really great. The reason I'm going to move them up a little bit is because Vanquish Soul does play them, and it's actually pretty good to play them in Vanquish Soul, just because it's getting a body onto your field. That's like something that can contest the field. But for the most part, they're not great. Called By is in always, yeah, Maxi exists. I don't think this list has Maxi, but obviously that'd be like in tier 0 by itself. We know Maxi, right? And similarly, I'm just going to move Ash Blossom in here as well. Yeah, I feel like I don't need to explain these. If you've played Master Duel in any capacity, if you haven't encountered Maxi, congratulations, you are the black sheep. But obviously, most of us, in fact, I think everyone, has encountered Maxi and understands the need to have an out to it. Anyway, moving on. Change of Heart. Trying to think what decks specifically would want this card in particular, and I'm struggling to think of anything. I don't necessarily think that it's bad. I just feel like it's not worth it right now. Again, I'm not too big of a fan of cards that specifically are designed to go second, or like as a going second option that can't be utilized as like a hand trap or something along those lines on your turn, going first or going second kind of thing. So there's that. But Change of Heart's it's not great right now. I struggle to think of a deck that it's like useful in, as well as a deck that it would be useful against. Like, Branded doesn't really care if you're going to change of heart something. Maybe a little, but not really. Labyrinth doesn't really care either. Super Heavy Samurai kind of cares, but they'll just negate it. Mana is similar. I'm trying to think of like what all the decks are that people are currently playing, and it's so many that I'm just like, I don't really think that it's warranted to play any like steel type effects. Yeah, I don't know. Also, the fact that it targets is not great. Cosmic Cyclone's not really worth it either. Yes, it technically hurts like Labyrinth or other such Floodgate stuff, but with Floodgates being more so out of the metagame, just because of how few of them there are, as well as the fact that like Labyrinth doesn't care too much about anything getting Cosmic Cycloned, because most of it is going to be chainable or something like that. It's not great right now. I definitely wouldn't include it into any of your decks unless... No, yeah, I just feel like there are better options. Most notably, Harpy's Feather Duster. I think Harpy's Feather Duster is fine right now. I'm going to put it in decent above the Abystials. But I think blowout cards like that are going to be a little bit better. So there's that. Next up, Crossout. Crossout is fine. I think it's decently good. Lots of hand traps are currently running around, so having the ability to like cross out any of those hand traps tends to be pretty good. But it's not exceptional. It's not going to be something that you're always going to include. But Maxi does exist. It's good. Dark Ruler No More. I think it's fine. I wouldn't include it in most decks. I think the only real deck that loses to Dark Ruler is Super Heavy Samurai, and I guess Mana as well. Manadium, or Manadium. I don't know how to say that card or that deck's name. Anyway, so there's only like 2 decks that really care. A lot of the other decks can play through it, and it's not really that big of a deal. They can recover, they can break board, they can play through spells and traps, etc. So it's not really that big of a deal against most of the other lists, or most of the other decks. Pancratops is... I'm going to say Pancratops is just not worth it right now. Fenrir still exists. It's oftentimes just better to go Fenrir anyway, because at the very least, Fenrir can special summon itself on your turn, whereas Pank doesn't. Again, Pank is kind of just a going second card, so I don't think it's as good. Speaking of which, I'm going to go with Fenrir. Fenrir is still decent just by itself. Because it's now only 1 slot, I think it's not as good, but I still think it's pretty good, just being able to have like an additional body onto your side of the field. I think there's a lot of decks that could utilize this. Like for example, in Vanquish Soul, you're still going to be running the 1 Fenrir, even though technically it does hurt to only have that 1 copy of it. I still feel like it's probably worth it. Econ's very situational. I think it really does depend on the meta, and at the current moment, I don't think it's very good for this metagame. It's not terrible, but you're not really like trying to dodge like targeted negation or anything like that. So I feel like it's just better not to play this. Again, this is more of like a side deck option, I would say. So anyway, evenly matched is fine. It's going to be negated similar to like Change of Heart, I guess. But for the most part, I think it's decent. It is a good, strong board wipe, which is nice, but it's not that big of a deal. I think Dark Ruler's a little bit better, so there's that. And again, strictly a going second card, not really going to do a whole lot going first. Not a big fan of that. Chalice is just not really worth it right now. There's not really any specific cards in particular that you want to just negate like wholesale, where it's just like, cool, I just need to negate that 1 card and we should be fine. So yeah, just not really worth it. Droplet, on the other hand, I think is pretty good actually in the current metagame. Being able to shut down specific cards while also putting cards into the graveyard isn't necessarily a bad thing. It also can target, or it can dodge target effect and negation as well, which is pretty good as well. And it being a quick effect that can be utilized both on your turn or on the opponent's turn is pretty decent. I don't think it's insane, but again, I still think it's pretty good and above some of these other cards. Gamma Steel's fine, as well as any other kaijus. They're fine. They're good. I don't think they're in a great spot right now, mostly because a lot of the end boards are ending on like multiple Omni Negates as well as like follow up and stuff like that. So it's not really that big of a deal to have like a kaiju land on your field, especially with how common like Branded and Labyrinth are. Those two decks really don't care about a kaiju hitting their field because it's Labyrinth who's playing mostly through traps, and if their monster goes away, they've probably already activated their effects and don't really need it anymore. Or it's Branded who can just like bring the monster back or like fusion summon again or recycle materials, and so like a kaiju's not really going to do a whole lot. Kurikara also I think is in a similar state. It's decent again. The only thing I would think of like playing this, actually now that I think about it, it's probably only played in Super Heavy, or not Super Heavy, in Vanquish Soul, and I don't think Vanquish Soul is like all that great right now. I'm not really worried about it in any particular fashion, so yeah, there's that. But it's mostly situational. I feel like it's not great right now, especially since Pearly has fallen off, and probably won't be too playable until we get the Sleepy Memory or Pearly Noir. Lightning Storm is it's fine. It's okay. There you go. It's okay. The problem is, again, it's just a going second card. I think Labyrinth, though, can utilize Lightning Storm a little bit better, but I'm actually going to put it not worth. I just don't think it's great right now. Again, not really good against a lot of the metagame because of, like, Omni Negates and stuff like that. But more specifically than that, I think it's just not good because going first, it doesn't do anything. Going second, it's not great into most boards. Yeah, being able to like nuke the board for Labyrinth can be frustrating for them, but they can chain most of the traps anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Chaining Branded is both spells and monsters, spells, traps, and monsters, so not really going to be able to do too much of what you want to do against that deck. Yeah, it just kind of doesn't do quite enough. Judgment, I think, is pretty... I'm trying to think, like, what this really does. And, I mean... Judgment's okay. You can play it in Labyrinth if more people are playing, like, Harpy's Feather Duster or what have you. I'm actually going to put this in situational for now. Again, it's similar. I think you're only really going to want to play this in Labyrinth. Strike is just not great right now. A lot of decks are just going to play through the Strike and not really care. So, there's that. Super Polymerization, I think, is pretty decent, actually. I can see a lot of decks being able to utilize this because of the extra deck space being there, or it being branded and being able to like generate advantage off of that. So I think it's okay. Not insane, but pretty decent. Triple attack is pretty good. Being able to have the ability to either take cards or look at the opponent's hands or what have you, and with hand traps being better in this meta than they have been in previous metas, I think this gets a bit of a bump as well. I think it's pretty good, and should definitely be in most of your decks. Thrust, on the other hand, I think has definitely fallen off quite a bit. I don't think it's really great right now. Yes, people are still going to like activate their effects, and with hand traps, it makes it more likely that this is going to resolve and be able to set you a trap. But, I mean, setting a trap isn't great, right? So, it's something, but then you'd have to play a brick, and it's not great because it's only a normal trap, so it's not like you can set like Branded Beast or something like that. And you could argue like, oh, it's good in like Labyrinth or something like that, but again, it's not great at breaking boards by itself unless you're playing additional targets, and there's not really that many great targets. As you see, like most of the good targets are just indecent. Again, hand traps I think are a lot better right now, so it's better to play hand traps, and so because of that, Thrust isn't as good. Sphere is just not really worth it right now. Well, I'm going to put it in decent. Similar to Kaiju's, I think it's okay. Being able to specifically hit Super Heavy Samurai is nice, but it also takes up your normal, and it doesn't really hit a lot of the other players of the metagame. It hits a few, like, I mean, it doesn't hit, like, Vanquish Soul very often. It's not going to do much to Labyrinth or Branded. Maybe it might do something to Branded, but taking up your normal does really hurt, so I'm going to put it a bit lower. Let's talk about Floodgates. Honestly, Floodgates are always going to be situational. If your deck can play them, sometimes they're good, but each and every one of them requires you to play a very specific deck. Vanquish Soul kind of likes there can be only one, but again, it's not that big of a deal. And then the rest are, again, very situational. Duel is in all ways. Duel right now is probably the best it has been for a really long time. Both Branded and Super Heavy Samurai, as well as Manadimian, are very search-centric strategies. So I feel like almost every deck should be able to play this, at least at 2 copies. Just entirely shutting down Super Heavy Samurai is very, very nice. On top of that, being able to shut down things like Branded, or at least slow them down, is also very nice. And then a myriad of other decks also just kind of fold to this card. While it's not great against things like Labyrinth or Vanquish Soul, I still think that because it absolutely stops and is kind of a silver bullet to more of the popular decks that are currently running around, that being Super Heavy Samurai and Manadimian, I think because of that, Duel goes up a bit. DD Crow's fine. I think a lot of people are playing it in specifically Super Heavy Samurai, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but I feel like there are better options in the current metagame, which we'll get to. But DD Crow's okay. I don't think it's bad. Being able to hit the Labyrinth spell traps, being able to hit, like, Pearly cards as well, being able to hit the Branded stuff, like Branded Fusion, is very nice. And some of the other things are good as well, but it's not an instant 3 of. I definitely think that there are better options. And maybe 1 or 2 in your deck is pretty good. Moonlit Shield's not bad. It's decent. Being able to negate, like, a Scarecrow when it summons itself or something like that is fine. But there's nothing that you really need to, like, chain block. But it is a hand trap, so it's decent. Shifter is pretty good if you could play it. I don't want to put it in situational, but it is just good in the current metagame. That's it. It's just a good card in the current metagame. Super Heavy Samurai sends cards to the graveyard. Branded sends cards to the graveyard and cares about that. Labyrinth kind of cares, but they can play around it, obviously. Manadimian absolutely cares. There's a lot of, like, grass decks running around, so there you go. Veiler is also pretty good. I think target effect negation isn't exactly fantastic right now, but it's still decent. Being able to negate Super Heavy Samurai Scarecrow, being able to negate the Super Heavy Samurai Wagon, or any of those, like, Super Heavy Samurai cards is pretty nice. So, yeah. And you could specifically play it in Super Heavy, so I think it's a little bit better than something like Crow as well. Phantasm's just not worth it. Not enough links to really see play. Yes, like, Super Heavy Samurai does link summon occasionally, you know, it does. But basically the rest of the metagame doesn't really do that a whole lot. Maybe here or there, but not a whole lot. Ghost Bell is fantastic right now. Is it better than Shifter? Better than Triple Tack. Ghost Bell is really, really strong right now because it hits Labyrinth. It's basically Ash's, like, 4, 5, and 6 if you're playing 3 copies of Ghost Bell. Which I don't think you necessarily should be playing 3 copies of it, but it's really, really strong because it hits Labyrinth, it hits Branded, it hits Super Heavy Samurai, it hits Manadimian, it hits just, like, everything that's currently in the metagame in a very strong way. Just, like, entirely shutting it down. The only thing that it doesn't do very well against is, like, specifically Branded in red when Branded Lost is on the field, which doesn't really matter all that much. But other than that, yeah, Ghost Bell is really, really strong right now. And I think it's just, like, a better DD Crow. DD Crow's kind of the budget option. I think Ghost Bell is going to be just better overall because of the previously mentioned ideas. Ghost Ogre is also really good right now, I think. Being able to hit continuous spells is very nice. Most notably things like Lost, things like, well, I guess Lost not so much, but, like, the Branded Regained, Branded Beast, the Waka Ushi, etc. Very strong card. Pretty good in the current metagame. Imperm is always good. Yeah, we'll put it up here. Imperm is just like a staple of almost every metagame. The fact that it dodges called by is very, very nice. The fact that it is a targeted effect negation is also very nice. The fact that you can set it to get a negate is also very nice. And yeah, just lots of things like that make it a very, very powerful card and is almost always going to be included in your deck. Nibiru is also very strong. Lots of combo decks are running around right now. So yeah, Nibiru is very nice. Also, so few people play around Nibiru, especially in Master Duel. This card is very, very strong. It's the ritual that's like target effect and negation. I mean, it's not bad if you can play it, but I'm struggling to think of like a deck that would play this besides like pure Dogmatica or like a ritual Dogmatica, I should say. So yeah, I'm just gonna put it in situational. I don't think it's bad right now. There's a like Effect Veiler and Imperm are really strong right now, so it's not terrible, but I struggle to think of a deck that it would see play in. And then the last card is Upstart Goblin. Honestly, if you can play it, or more specifically, if you need to play it, yeah, it's not bad. It's still Upstart Goblin. So yeah, that's going to be it for this list. I feel like it makes sense for the most part. Again, hand traps, pretty good. Board breakers, not so much, with a few exceptions here or there, like Triple Tech, which is good against hand traps while also being good at breaking boards, which is nice. Droplet, which is very good for, again, similar reasons, being able to break boards while also being able to, assist going first as well, which is very strong. And then, yeah, the rest pretty much makes sense. Going second options and board breakers aren't nearly as good because you just want to prevent your opponent from getting to those boards. And that's it for today, or for this episode. Hopefully you guys did indeed enjoy. If you did, a like is very much appreciated. And if you want to check out more content like this, as well as more Yu-Gi-Oh!, then just be sure to subscribe. And I thank you guys so much for watching, and remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye. Shout out to the Frost Guard, my members. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the content.